have the pleasure of hosting Mistress Yseult of Broceliande from the Summits, who she is both a pelican and a laurel. And what is the lion's strength?
Yes.
Okay, the and part of the lion's strength. I'm very, very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for being on with Ashaxi and I.
Pleasure.
So we usually start these with your origin story. So if you can start with how you found the SCA, where, when, why, and all of that, that would be great.
Okay, well, in a way, the SCA found me. I spent 30 years as a high school English teacher, and in 1982, I was teaching a course called Humanities to sophomores, and we did ancient world all the way up through the modern, and I think I'd just done Beowulf, and one of my students walked up to me after class, and she said, "Do you really like this stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Well, then you'd love the SCA." And she explained what it was. And she was, she was active with the Barony of Adiantum, and they were going to have their midwinter feast in January. This was like just a few weeks after Antir became a kingdom. And so I went to midwinter feast. I made myself a little sort of late Anglo-Saxon Norman type gown, and I just loved it. I thought it was fabulous. We were in a vaulted ceiling hall. It was a women's club that used to be a church, so it looked, kind of vaguely Gothic, and the whole ambiance and the entertainment and everything. And that was the beginning of what will be a lifelong love affair with history and reenactment. She was 16 at the time, I believe. And so she was the one that really got me in. And I got very active very fast. I think I autocrated my first event before I'd been in for a year. I just started doing stuff. We had a quest up in one of the parks and went from place to place and did things, and that was lots of fun.
Sort of like a treasure hunt or a scavenger
Yeah.
hunt.
Yeah, you had to cross a bridge where a guy had a sword, and you had to fight him, and you made groups and you went around and you got clues. And there was one woman was playing a seer and would tell you something about the future, which would get you to your next point. And there was a fountain up in the woods where you went and got, holy water. And then, it was just lots of fun.
It sounds like lots of fun.
I've always wanted to do another one, but it takes a lot of people to put something like that on because you have to staff each of the stations.
Yeah, I think it would be really fun to do something like that that's COVID friendly. Like it could be a car scavenger hunt where people are stationed, masked, and they can give the next clue appropriately socially distanced. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, all sorts of possibilities. So, I quickly became, a year later, I autocrated Eggles Tourney.
Holy cow! And that's a big one. Was that in the very beginning of Eggles?
No, that was number 9. That was in a little park up north of Eugene here, and we probably had 300 some people.
So tell me how you fell into that, because that is, one of the Summit's, maybe the Summit's biggest event, and a year in and autocrating that's a huge deal.
Well, like I said, I was a high school English teacher, so I was used to organizing things and stuff, and I'd always done that. When I was a kid, I kind of ran the neighborhood group of kids, and it just seemed, to me, it seems easy to do. You just get all the pieces together and you make it happen. So it was, obviously I had lots of help about, what happens at Eggles Tourney, since I'd only been to one before I autocrated it. But it worked. And I've been autocrating ever since. It's something I really love to do because in a sense, you get to throw a big party with somebody else's money.
I never thought about it that way. That is a great way to think about it.
And just so everybody knows, this is also very much pre-Principality of the Summits.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, Adiantum was the only barony south of Three Mountains, and there were very few other groups. But everybody, because it was at the point where I came in, we just split with the West. So Eggles became the event where the West merchants came north and Ontier came south. So we were like the Burqa of the northern West Coast. And the shopping was always terrific. So, you know, that sustained Eggles' participation for a number of years. And then, of course, we were always a very arts and sciences oriented barony. So we made these fabulous tourney prizes. So people would come and really seriously try to win the prize. I mean, if the prize was a Norse tent with carved boards or a tourney table or, you know, something like that, people wanted it because you couldn't buy this stuff anywhere back then. You had to make it yourself. So to win one just for being a stick jock, that was good.
Did you have anyone that was sort of your mentor early on that kind of showed you the ropes, or did you just get in there and make it happen?
I kind of just jumped in. Janet of Arden, Mistress Janet, became a very good friend. So I got a lot of the backstory from her. But when I first started, I really had the feeling there was that sense of there were the people who'd been there since the beginning of Adiantum. They all knew each other. There was a weekly gathering at the Baron and Baroness's house. And I was very aware that I didn't know anybody and they didn't know me. And that summer in '82, I had the opportunity through school to take a group of students to England and France for study and homestays. I mean, this was a free trip for me because I was together with a Spanish teacher from the high school. We were leading it. And there was an antiquarian books convention in the hotel where we were staying near the British Museum. And one of the old guard had said, well, if you happen to find a Norris, do bring it home. And I did. I found Norris, all the volumes. So I brought them home, and I always felt like I kind of bought my way into the barony initially because they were so impressed. It was like, oh my God, it's really the Norris, you know. And after that, I felt like I was sort of accepted. So I've always tried really hard to bring people in because I don't want them to feel like I did initially, that, you know, they find a way to include them in doing something or helping or help them make things or something.
Yeah.
That made a big impression.
It's a really hard thing because you get so involved in having your fun that you forget that there's this new person that needs to be brought in, and that outreach is so important.
Yeah. No, I think that's really crucial. And I rapidly became an officer. I couldn't believe it that the barony at that time had no bank account and it had no newsletter. It had a newsletter, the Elf Hill Times, which had fallen into abeyance. And they had done a twice yearly arts and sciences issue, and the Elf as a twice yearly journal had survived. And Mistress Chemin de Sanctour was at that time editing it and doing a terrific job. So we had this journal that was known up and down the West Coast, if not throughout the rest of the known world, because, you know, pre-internet, this was the how-to journal. Most of our articles were always very practical, you know, how to make this, how to make that, how to find names, how to, you know, do stuff like that. So I said, well, we have to have a newsletter. How else are we going to let people know what's going on? So I started a newsletter again and named it the Bicranial Bear, because our two-headed bear is our you know, totem animal on our arms. And so I get, we called the office the proto-notary at the time, and then the SCA told us we had to be chroniclers. But I did that for a couple of years. And then I became seneschal. And one of the things that I was actually very proud of as seneschal, a few months after I got the job, we had what we called a State of the Barony meeting. And what seemed to me was that when you had a business meeting, as we did monthly, you did the business. You know, you talked about the next events and the budget and, you know, the officer things and the stuff that you had to do to be part of a nonprofit organization and just get things organized. You never had the chance to just sit around and kind of shoot the breeze and talk about what we would call futuring, I suppose. You know, well, where do we see ourselves in a year, 5 years? What do we want to do? Are there bigger projects that we'd like to do that might be, you know, beyond the scope of the business meeting, but would require some thinking and planning? So we started these State of the Barony meetings with the idea that we would have them either yearly or every other year to just take time out and do that kind of all-inclusive talking about, you know, where have we been? Where are we? Where do we want to go? Dream a little, scheme a little kind of thing. And it has really stood the barony in good stead. We still have them today. I remember when I was on hiatus, I'll get to that in a little while, but my good friend Mistress Marion Starvelt, who I was the 3rd Baroness, she became the 5th Baroness of Adiantum. And I wasn't playing actively, although I was still an SCA member because of the demands of my mundane work. And she said, you've got to come to the State of the Barony meeting. And we were supposed to have someone from out of town be the facilitator, and that person couldn't make it. And so she turns to me and she said, you've got experience doing this. Would you do it? And I thought, oh, you've been scheming, because apparently she was afraid this might happen, that a conflict might come up. So I got to run a State of the Barony meeting when the barony was, the then Baron and Baroness were about to divorce, and one was going to leave the SCA and the other one would become a solo baroness. And she said, you know, you actually have some experience with this. And it's like, okay, I can do this. But anyway, the State of the Barony, I think, is a very useful thing to do. And it has really helped Adiantum kind of renew its sense of self. And it's, you know, you could do that with a principality too, frankly.
My brain is spinning and I'm thinking, oh, we should do that with the peerages too.
Oh yeah. Well, we did have, there was a retreat, and I'm trying to think, I think I remember Skyping into a Pelicans retreat or something. And they did those maybe in the late aughts or early teens, somewhere around in there, because it was after I came back, and that was very useful, I thought.
Yeah.
You know, but like in the SCA, if it's more than 3 years old, it's beyond living memory. Which makes me a fossil. Yeah. But you know, sometimes you have to reinvent the wheel because everybody's forgotten there were wheels.
Totally true. So
yeah.
After you were seneschal, how long was it before you came the 3rd Baroness, and how did that happen?
Well, I was seneschal from 85 to 7, and then I did I was the Arts and Sciences Minister for about 1.5 years. And then Ulfheathen and Regenleaf announced that they were thinking about stepping down. And this was back in the days where every barony could determine their own process for the turnover of Baron and Baroness. And what we had in place in Adiantum, I think, actually was a pretty good process. They nominated a couple as castellans. And the idea was that the castellans would serve for at least a year, and they would attend events kind of in the stead of the Baron and Baroness to represent us at crown events or regional events, so that people could see their leadership style, and they could also get a sense for what you had to do in the job. And the first couple they nominated realized that they just couldn't do it. They had young children. She was about to start a nursing program, and they said, thank you, but mundane life trumps the hobby, so we're out. So then I and another guy were nominated as castellans, and we served for a year. And then we had a meeting, and the barony got to vote on whether they wanted us to be recommended to the crown. And as it turned out, they voted that they wanted me and not him, which created some pretty bad feelings. It was very awkward for a little while. So I served as castellan for another year. And then the crown just announced that they were going to show up at Eggles and make me baroness. So they did. So I became Baroness of Adiantum at Eggles tourney in 1990. And there was, I never had a baron. I was it. And on the upside, I, as a teacher, had summers off. So during the really heavy event season, I had no work commitments, which was really nice. It really freed me up to be very active, more so than most people who have to earn a living can be, because this is a hobby. It's, unless you're retired, as I am now, it's not your full-time thing. So, and that I was baroness for 3 years, and I never felt it to be a strain. At the time, Adiantum just simply didn't have much in the way of fighters. So in a sense, lots of times the job is divided, where the baron sort of, nurtures and leads the fighting community or supports them, and the baroness often takes the arts and sciences side of things, not necessarily all the time, but we were clearly by membership an arts and sciences focused group, and we also put on events, obviously Eggles, and we started the Amergans event while I was baroness. That was Lono and Valeria that started that. And we autocrated, we did a 12th night in 1990. So we were doing big things, just not heavy fighting things. But it was, I don't know, being baroness or baron, is a really interesting job, because it's not really defined. If you look in the laws and such, you represent the barony to the crown and the crown to the barony, and you hold court and you can create and give awards. And that's kind of it. So I see that as sort of the steel girders, it's just the bare bones of the thing. And every baron and baroness then has to decide, I think, what you want to do within that framework. How elaborate do you want to get with court? One of the things that I enjoyed, because one of the things that attracted me to the SCA was a sense of ceremony and the sort of theatricality of it. I'm not a religious person, so I don't have church service to do that for me. And this fulfilled a part of something that I enjoyed. So one of the things that we did with court, and this was with very much the connivance of Marion and Ambrose and their large household, was I had the low and middle justice. The crown, of course, has the high justice. And so they would make up these lawsuits that they would bring, and I would have to give, a judgment on, my daughter won't marry the man that I picked out for her, or what do we do about the stray cows, or whatever. So that we tried to bring some good theater into court, not just handing out awards. And I think that was very successful. We had, during that time, a couple of people who were members of the barony who were actually law students. So we actually had what we called the law revel up at the U of O Law School, and we used one of their courtroom rooms and did a kind of a Magna Carta era law thing, you know, court with cases and whatnot. So that was lots of fun. And
Reagan says, don't forget the paternity suit.
Oh, yes, Miklos. Who is that man? And whose son is he? I mean, we had such a good time with that. And then another thing that I loved doing was at my own home, so we could have beer and wine and things that you can't necessarily do at a rented site or under the auspices of the SCA Inc. We had taverns, and some of those were in persona. I would have, you know, it's 1193 and you're in the town of the city of Narbonne and this is what's going on and here are some roles you could play. And then for a couple of hours, people would sort of role play within that. I mean, I suppose now we call it LARPing. Sometimes we just had taverns that were a chance to hang out and talk SCA or modern stuff, but it gave a chance for people to socialize and just without anybody really having to put on an event. Because the hard thing for people in Adiantum is that the coolest event of the year is the one we put on. So we're all working, you know.
And you work hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten to be a big event. It got huge for a while there in the 90s. So, you know, that having that putting on a variety of different types of events is something I've always really enjoyed because it's fun to be elsewhen. You know, I always thought of it as the best vacation I could take without leaving town. You know, because you could just, well, let's go to the Viking period. One of my fond memories was at Cair Lutris. They had a tavern, and Ulfheathen was speaking in Old Icelandic. I was speaking French, and someone else was speaking Spanish, and we were trying to make each other understand what we were saying, just as you might in a real, you know, tavern traveling in the Middle Ages.
Wow. Wow. That's something I've always really admired about the summits is how innovative everyone is and how much fun that you make and create down there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that was really central to being a Baroness was that the summits didn't yet exist, but we were feeling our way toward it. So while I was Baroness, the summits was forming and having defenders of the summits. So we had a defender and lady, and then we became a crown principality. And there was all of this, you know, oh, we don't want Ontir to fall apart. You can't split away. And we said, okay, then the crown has to come further south than Three Mountains. You can't just come to Eggles and win the prize and go away. You need to come south of Adiantum because, you know, there are groups down there. So that Summit's identity really was forming as the principality that didn't want to become another kingdom. We just wanted, again, that sense of ceremony, the ability to do courts, and play with that aspect of our game. Because Ontir was huge, and the kings were almost always from the Seattle area. And, you know, that was in the run of all the Vikings. And it was, you know, they weren't down here at all. So, you know, the first Kingdom Award I ever received in person was my pelican. Does that tell you something about the summits? Wow. So, you know, I provided cover for that because I was the Baroness and I could have court. So in my baronial court, the lady and, you know, defender of the summits could come and say things and do things. And, you know, that provided a three-ring circus in which we could you know, play.
And give you a platform for all the theatrics that you're so good at.
Yeah, so, you know, that was that I always identified so strongly with the barony more than the summits, but yet it was really important to me that I be able to provide that to the summits, because I really believed in the principality and that we needed that level, just like Mists and Sinagor are part of the West, and they're not about to break off because they get both the joy of being a principality and the joy of being part of the kingdom. And I think that suits summits very well, and continues to. And, you know, we're demographically kind of a poor area. There's not a lot of lucrative employment down here outside of big cities being Eugene or Salem. And Salem wasn't even part of the original summits. They joined later. So, you know, it was a very rural area in that sense, with smaller, you know, big towns rather than, you know, like Grants Pass or Roseburg or the Medford Ashland area or Klamath Falls. But, you know, and those southern groups played with Alicia and the Northern California groups. You know, it was kind of the whole state of Jefferson thing all over again.
And because of that, that economic situation, those people weren't able to travel into the northern parts of the kingdom to experience that kingdom court.
Right.
So they just weren't getting it at all.
No, you know, and that's, I mean, you know, people say, well, you know, people from Kingdom Central, I'll say from Portland to Seattle, you know, well, they don't want to travel that far. And it's like but we travel that far all the time when we go someplace or farther. I remember driving to Vancouver for Dak's step down. That was the infamous one where he mentioned that he was leaving the crown in Canada and they held things up for 2 hours because it was a thing of value. And it was like, oops, shouldn't have said that. I can remember we're all sitting around and the feast is getting cold. Where is he?
Sometimes maybe you aren't that honest.
Right. That's when Antir learned that you don't talk about the regalia at all. But I drove up and back. This was while I was teaching. You know, you leave Friday afternoon, you get back Sunday night, boom, you're at work on Monday morning. And I vowed that I would no longer drive to events where I spent more time driving than I spent awake at the event, because it was just too crazy. Maybe in the summertime, but not when I had to work. And, you know, it was like, okay, you know, it's just the way life is, because the real world is the real world, and you have to be coherent Monday morning.
Yeah, I've made that commitment to our family as well, that we will not drive more than the time we spend at an event. It's just not happening.
Right. You know, and I mean, everybody says, oh, well, in Atenfeld. Well, this isn't Atenfeld. But because it was just me and I didn't have anybody to bounce things off of so much, I guess my role models were the Kendalls, kind of from afar, because I didn't really know them, but I saw what they did and I really admired it. And the fact that they were always there and always on and always doing things. And, you know, that was what I strove to do. But it made me think a lot about what being Baroness really was. And it was a different role to the outside when I was being Baroness of Adiantum in the summits or in Antir, as opposed to being Baroness of Adiantum in Adiantum. And one was a more formal and, you know, representative mode, and the other one was leadership. And that's something that I really thought that was important, and that another reason why the summits needed to be the summits with a prince and princess, because having a figurehead who's not the seneschal, the guy who has to sign the papers or the woman who has to run the meetings or something, you could lead by example. You could model PLQs, you could model involvement, you could model courtesy and inclusiveness. And what I love to do, because I am by nature a teacher, was you could really help people develop their personas, develop their skills, and with personal growth, you know, learning how to autocrat, learning how to take responsibility, learning how to deal tactfully with the inept but well-meaning person who keeps screwing things up but really wants to help. And, you know, I mean, just learning some of those social skills that not everyone who came to the SCA had, but they were quite capable of learning. And I, in a sense, I thought that was probably my most important role, was that nebulous leadership role, because anybody can be a figurehead and sit there on a chair and wear a hat and say, okay, I give you this and thank you for the gifts. But to be there week in and week out, to know your populace, to know who needed encouraging, who needed reining in, you know, who could work well or not work well with someone else, so that you could get people to co-autocrat things and work together on stuff, to build a sense of camaraderie by having a lot of the more social events that were little and local, where people could just hang out and develop friendships instead of just being at a business meeting or working hard at Eggles Tourney, although certainly working hard together does that. But that was something that I think is very important in being a baron or baroness, and that I mean, in a larger scale, I think a prince and princess can still do that, because when you're king or queen of Antir, my God, you spend all your time traveling. It's, you know, it is outgoing, it's presentation, and your interactions have to be with your officers and doing, because you have to do business. But a baron or baroness doesn't have to do business in the same way. I mean, there's the award thing, but the seneschal does the business, you know, and you have your officers who can do that. So it's, I see the baron and baroness, you know, the landed nobility, as being a very important middle management, human resources kind of job, to put it in mundane terms.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for the society.
I think so too. And I think that it's a lot to ask of one person or one pair of people to be that person for everything Salem and South, when it was just Adiantum. So I totally think that it was the right thing to do to develop a principality like that. I think it was really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's given us a sense of identity here, which we hadn't been able to get in Antir. I mean, we felt like we were part Antir, but kind of like the poor stepchild, and because nobody came here. And I'm sure Inlands has had that problem, and I'm sure that the far reaches of Tiree have had that problem. You know, it just comes literally with the territory, because the space gets in between. So, you know, and while I was doing all of this, I also edited the Elf Hill Times starting in 1984. So I put out the twice yearly journal from 84 to 91. And I also published 5 other books during that time. And this is a good deal of what I would spend my summer weekdays doing. And that was a lot of fun, because this was the equivalent of the internet of the late 80s. We were always looking for people who could do good how-to articles, finding vendors down the West Coast, and I found a couple in the Midwest. And we reissued the songbook and did a supplement. Best of the Watch Pot folks approached me and said, how about we do a best of the Watch Pot? And so we did, in 2 volumes, because this was before all the wonderful medieval cooking books got published. So there were very few. And then I got connected with a guy named Robert Trump, who was, I think, from St. Louis or someplace in the middle there. And he was a theater costumer. So he had written a book, Doublet and Trunk Hose. So we published that. And then I had just mundanely taken a workshop one long week on nonfiction writing and went from there up to July coronation. And this guy walked up to me and he said, "Are you Yseult of Broceliande?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm Torvald Grimson. And would you like to publish a translation of the Viandier?" And I said, "Oh my God, there is no day in my life when I am more ready to do this than I am right now, coming from this nonfiction workshop." So we had become Alfrahager Publishing Society, a separately incorporated 501c3 nonprofit educational corporation doing business in the state of Oregon that sold journals. And the money we made from that, we donated to the barony. So the barony had both Eggles Turney and Alfrahager. So we had more money than Ontier did at this point. I mean, literally. But we published the first English translation of Taillevent's Viandier, which I'm sure Terence Scully hates to this day because he was apparently at the time working on his translation. He couldn't claim that it was the first English translation because Torvald beat him to it. But Torvald was wonderful. I mean, he had done such a good job, so we brought that out too. So that's, besides running things, I love finding information and sharing it. And that's one of the things that I just do in the SCA is research and then say, "Oh, did you see this? Did you see that?" So that was my publishing career. That was 8 years of.
Wow, that's a long term. So what happened for you in the SCA when you stepped down as Baroness?
Well, I had intended, I mean, back then, Baron or Baroness was a forever job. There was no term limit. And that was fine with me. I was no way burned out. But I was Baroness in 90, and in 92, I met and married my husband. So I had a new hobby. And at that time, Oregon was going through the Measure 5? It was Prop 13 in California. It was revamping the property tax laws and channeling money differently into education. And I was teaching by this point advanced placement composition and European literature and a number of other things. And my class size is almost doubled. And when you're teaching writing and your students are writing every other week, and instead of having 36 of them, you now have 75 of them, I no longer had time for a hobby. I could either have a husband or I could have a hobby. I couldn't have both. And I chose my husband, obviously. And I said, folks, I am not going to stay Baroness in name, because that's what had happened with the previous Baron and Baroness. They had basically burned out, and they just, I think, hadn't recognized it, and they weren't very active, and they weren't being leaders. They had been very much so early on. And I thought, this is a mistake I am not going to make. So I said, folks, after 3 years, I'm going to have to step down. So I did at Eggles Turney in 1993. And I still stayed a member of the SCA. I've been a member for 39 years now. But in the summers, I occasionally wrote stuff, and I participated. I had joined at that point the Longship Company, which was based in Annapolis, Maryland, and they had a longship, and I got to go back and row with them once when the Viking ships came for Columbus Day in 92. That was pretty cool. But they did an apozine, which is pre-internet, where you contribute an article and the editor collates it and then sends the whole thing out to the contributors, and then you get 2 more issues. So it was another model for having a journal to share research. So I was doing SCA-like stuff through the 90s, but I just didn't have the time to be involved locally. And we started, my husband and I travel a lot. So I was getting to go to France and England and see all of this stuff. And, that would take 4 to 6 weeks out of the summer. So, I didn't have the time and space for the SCA. But then when I retired in 2005, I thought, okay, I can have hobbies again. Excuse me. So I did. And I must have, excuse me, swallowed the wrong way.
Yeah, no problem.
It happens.
But
You just take a second and breathe.
But Marion had gotten me back in the SCA because we stayed good friends. And the one thing I regret in the SCA is missing her term, her and Ambrose's term as Baron and Baroness, because they served for 7 years. And I think they did a bang up job. My thing was dancing. So we danced for 3 years. Her thing was the sergeantry. So she had sergeants, and she had perfectly period feasts and all this cool stuff that I'd occasionally drop in on. But when I came back in 2005, the internet had happened. And I felt, honest to God, like Rip Van Winkle. All of a sudden, here was all of this stuff available on the internet. And when I came back, some of the old timers said, well, you're going to revive the Elf Hill Times? And I said, no, we can Google it, I mean, you don't need to have these journals anymore because it's all there. And, since then, with the digitizing of manuscripts and museum holdings and all of this stuff. So the first few years, I just wallowed in internet research. It was amazing, the stuff I could find. And that was so much fun. So as I came back, it was very much in an arts and sciences orientation. And Marion had, Adiantum had gotten the bid for 12th Night in 2009. And she was in charge of decorations, and she said, come on, you need to help me with this. And I said, oh, that'll be fun. So we were at Ben Franklin, and they were getting rid of their prints. And they, those big plastic envelope sort of things that you slide prints in and they're transparent. They were selling those for $3 a piece. And Marion looked at him and she said, we could make stained glass windows out of that. And I said, ooh, yeah, because for $3 you got 2 big pieces of clear acetate. So we bought the whole lot. And then we had to figure out how to make them. So I started experimenting with various things, and, magic markers were right out. It wasn't strong enough. And I finally figured out that Copics were the way to go. And I basically invented the stained glass windows that you've seen at 12th Night in Adiantum.
Can we look at some pictures of those?
Yeah.
They're the coolest.
So we did them in 2009, and we, oh yes, that's my Merovingian garb.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, but this Valley River Inn had these great windows, and I thought, well, we'll just fill them up. And these were the old pieces of acetate, and that was the size they were, and they happened to fit the windows. I mean, it was just absolutely perfect. Mm-hmm. So the great window was the heraldry of Antir and all the baronies, plus the 3 peerages. And then what I did was the side panels with the trees is the Tree of Jesse design from the Chartres windows. And I substituted in, instead of the ancestors of Jesus, the totem animals or principal heraldic figures of the various baronies. So, you know, we had the phoenix from Three Mountains and the two-headed bear, or egg. I used a picture of Eggle for Adiantum, and the lion's gator for Lion's Gate, and, you know, things like Bubba for Whywood, things like that. And they were all visual puns. And I just had a ball making this stuff up. I mean, it was so much fun.
It is the most incredible thing to experience.
It really transforms the space.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm all about ambiance, and I always felt sorry for the groups that put on 12th night, because mostly hotels don't want you to touch their walls, you know, and if they do, they'll hang it. So it gets prohibitively expensive, and there's not much you can do to juice it up. But when we started with Valley River Inn, it was still locally owned, and they let us do stuff. So I took some of this from the German manuscript, the Minnesinger manuscript, and turned this into a Grail Knight. And this is a King Arthur. I turned him into a King of Antir, and all of the little grotesques are out of various manuscripts. As you see, half my computer is filled with little screen captures of manuscripts and stuff. You know, here's a Minnesinger manuscript with instead of a swan, I put a pelican on his head, and the Echternach lion becomes the Antir lion with the double tail. And, you know, it's just lots of fun to do that. And we did the Legends of Antir, and Raven Caratone did the drawings for those based on the style of the oldest extant stained glass windows in Europe, which are in Cologne maybe, or Stuttgart, somewhere in Germany. And so using that style, she did, you know, people that we thought were worthy of recognition in Antir. And we expanded that this last time. So Steingrim, Lau, Torgel, Theoden, and we did the Kendalls, and we added Churchill and Julius Sempronia and Dublin and Ludwiga and Grendel. And he was actually, because of the knife, we put him at the entrance of the restaurant. But these were little this is all Luttrell Salter around the edges, and then various grotesques, all going to where we had the A&S room. And, you know, just, we did food procurement, we did Marshall windows, just, you know, the hotel rented a high lift for us, and the hotel guys actually put them up. And that was
so amazing.
Yeah.
How do you store these? Where are these kept?
Well, they actually live in Marion's basement, because she has a full basement that's warm. And they're backed with, they're acetate backed with, I can't think of the word, it escapes me. But anyway, it's paper, acid-free paper. And it's taped together with black and masking tape. So we have big pieces of cardboard, and we staple them very carefully with just one side of the staple through the edging, back to back. And then they're in big, Raven worked at the U of O bookstore, and she would get us the boxes that big oak tag boards came in. So they're all stored in boxes.
She says it's glassine paper.
Glassine, that's it. Yes, thank you. Words fail. But yeah, so they're stored vertically and very carefully.
And there are literally hundreds of these.
Yes, there are. Yes.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, this whole series says Vivat Antir, and then the surround has the baronies are all on the great window, so that the surrounds are all of the other branches of Antir, plus all of the officers and the guilds were in the A&S room. So we had all of Antir's heraldry somewhere represented.
So did you paint all of these, or did you have a team, or?
I did all of them except some of the heraldry ones on the great window, and we got folks from the barony to help make those. But
Wow.
all of those I did. I mean, this is just, it's so much fun. It's like making yourself a giant coloring book and then getting to play with it.
Fair enough.
There's Grendel.
There's Grendel. And I made cover-ups. The art on the walls was screwed to the wall, so I made banners with a slat across the top that we could pop over the frame that would cover up all of the artwork, so it looked more medieval. And that's when I discovered the second Bible of Charles the Bald and the wonderful designs in it. So a lot, almost all of what I call the bar banners and the cover-ups are all from a late 9th century manuscript, Northern France. And then this last, I guess for 2015, I did the Achievement of Antir. And oh my, was that awkward to do, because I had to split it up onto 3 panels. So they overlap a little bit, but I just thought, oh man, if you could just see that walking down the stairs, that would be so much fun.
It's just so amazing.
Yeah, this is one of the designs from the second Bible of Charles the Bald.
And these are painted fabric.
Yes, yes, these are simply bed sheets with acrylic craft paint. I did not use fabric additive for the paint because I wanted them to be stiff so that they would hang flat and sort of approximate, in a sense, wall paintings rather than tapestries.
And these are the pictures you sent me for your flyer. So we'll just take a quick look at those. And then this is some of your embroidery.
I love working with wool on wool. And I made these are going to be burqa bags. They were intended for prizes for Eggles or volunteer raffle things. They were fun to do, and I made the wooden pieces for them. This was the set that I did most recently.
I love little bag projects like that because they're just so fun.
Yeah, this is a coat that I made. As somebody quipped, these caftan coats are like Antir dress casual and or business casual. And these are designs out of the second Bible of Charles the Bald.
And is that applique or is that applique? And
This is the dogs are applique, the blue and red interlace is all sewn, and the gold on the dogs and the blue on the dogs is all embroidered. So that's all embroidered.
Wow.
And these are embroidered. The pattern is actually from a 12th century enamel, but the motif goes back to Carolingian times. These were Moussan enamels from northeast France up in the Meuse River Valley.
And that's wool on linen?
No, this is linen on linen.
Okay.
So pretty.
Yeah, that was really fun to do. Yeah, actually the thread is a mixture of linen and rayon.
Linen thread is really sticky. It's really hard to work with.
Yeah, this is softer with the addition of the rayon, so it made it easier to use. And this is the design again from the motif is from the second Bible of Charles the Bald, so basically 9th century Carolingian.
And that's all hand embroidered?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You want to go back?
Well, she's wearing it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I didn't realize the whole thing was hand embroidered. But
Oh yeah.
that is amazing.
Yeah. That was a fun project. I did that in November and December before 12th night, I guess in 2015. This is kind of the effect you can see that I like to do at events. These, what I call the bear dots, the lower wall hangings, the beige ones with the red stripes and the black bears.
Back here.
Those are things that we made in the barony. I guess I made a lot of them back in the late 80s so that we could use them for events and cover things up. And then the Entier Lion and the Summits ones are from the 12th night set. And the Très Léger ones up there are ones that were made in the late 90s, I think, for another 12th night that Adiantum hosted.
It makes such a difference in the ambiance. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it really helps. I mean, these were covering up paintings that were on the wall. So, and those are single and double bed sheets.
There's Vivian, Baroness Three Mountains. And you hand painted all of these yourself as well.
Yep.
You're making me want to retire.
Fire is so much fun. Oh my God. And I
all
made
the art.
yes. Oh yes. Oh my God. All day, all the time. The black ones in the back I made to hang up in our big green, our big huge circus tent that we use at Eggles. And I thought, oh, but they would work at 12th night too.
Very
So
cool.
all of these sheets, are you thrifting these sheets, or are
Yep.
you buying them?
No,
from
I'm
stores?
thrifting them. I mean, occasionally, like for the Entier and the Lion, I bought new ones because I wanted them to be good, and you know, that was going to be a big project. But no, you can see some variation in the black there. These are all thrift store things.
Amazing.
And I settled on the red because originally the hotel had this very Renaissance looking dark red carpet and it fit right in. They went and changed the carpets. This set I did in the fall of 2018. We had been to Italy and I was so taken. We were in San Gimignano and in their basically their town hall, there's this amazing room that has all the original wall painted frescoes, and this motif was all around the border at the top. And I thought, oh, we could do that outside the great hall for court. So I mean, I could tell you the size of every wall and every window in Valley River Inn. I have it all written down.
They're like, here comes that crazy lady with her measuring tape, measuring out the walls again.
Exactly. The maintenance staff got to know me because I show up randomly and say, oh, hi, I'm back again. I just wanted to measure this room. You know, oh, fine, you know.
So when you get sheets, it looks like most of these are flat sheets. Do you take the fitted sheets and like cut the corners off and rehem them to use those as well?
I use those for the smaller bar banners to cover up the paintings.
Okay.
Someone says you measured the bathroom stalls.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Marion and I had schemes for that. See, we both love marginalia, so we had to have little side things stuck around. And then I made this set. There were, I guess, 4 of them, 4 or 5 of them for Vesta's laureling vigil. And we borrowed them back to do the baths because we'd loaned the Roman hangings to somebody and they never came back to us. So we went with Minoan this time.
And
So beautiful.
by baths, this is the pool area of the hotel.
I mean, you decorate everything, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. And whoever has those Roman wall hangings, get them returned.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot of work to just abscond with. These are so
Wow.
cool.
They are.
And again, these are just sheets.
These are just sheets. Yep,
And craft paint.
yep. Delta Ceram coat, 100% acrylic craft paint.
How do you store these?
You can get the cores around which are rolled rugs or linoleum from floor covering places. And we roll them around one of those, painted side out so the paint doesn't crack, because you don't want to fold them.
Right.
Because again, I deliberately did not put the textile medium in it because I wanted them to be a little stiffer and so they would hang flat. I have used textile medium with some things where I wanted it to be softer and billowy, but for the design to show, I wanted it to be a little stiff.
So tell me that you're using a projector and that you're not. Okay, good.
No, I'm not. Oh God, no, I am not freehanding these.
Okay.
I finally bought a digital projector. I had borrowed one for a while, and then I got my own, and oh, what a wonderful toy that is. I mean, all of these things. We have big picture windows in our house, so I just tape the fabric to the window and project, the thing on it, and then draw it in pencil, literally. And I did that with the stained glass window designs too. And you just draw it on and then paint it or color it. And,
you're giving me all the ideas.
oh yeah, more people should do this. I mean, we could decorate our world.
We really could.
Tent hangings, I mean.
Oh yes, yes.
You could just do so much, and it's thrift store sheets, so it's
Yeah.
like $5, right?
And time.
Yeah, and you get the coupon from Michael's, and you get cheap paint or Joann's or wherever. And I mean, it's not going to break the bank.
And it's such an incredible way to level up your kid.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I love this one, Studley dog.
So cute.
Super cute.
These are all from the Second Bible of Charles the Bald.
And there was another one that looked like that one earlier, but it's different. The heads are different color.
Yeah, there's one that's green and one that's blue. And we hung these all over the bar wherever they put something on the wall that we wanted to cover up. And I like accessories. So I knit mundanely. So I started exploring period knitting, and there are the 14th century knitted pouches in the cathedral in Sion in Switzerland. So I've been doing them in very small lace weight wool, and doing them. I do a lot of grails and things like that can be used as largesse. And
wow.
This says this is victory, the Kufic script, and the other one says blessings, Baraka. And these are all period. There's a lot of overlap between the knitting patterns and embroidery patterns in Germany and Switzerland at the same time. So I've looked back to some of the model books and the embroidery patterns. So these are all period patterns. And now I'm on an Anglo-Saxon kick, and the Prittlewell burial about 580, 600 is the only example we have of painted wooden box from Anglo-Saxon times. And these are the colors that were used: yellow ochre, red ochre, white, and black. So I use, these are motifs off of some of the Sutton Hoo stuff. And conjecturally this is the style of box they might have had, but conjecturally what they might have done with the design.
And did you make the box too, or?
No, the boxes I find at thrift stores. More
I go thrift shopping with the Summits ladies sometime.
Yeah, this was a wine box, another slide top wooden box.
I love that fish.
Anglo-Saxon stuff.
The fish is really cool.
Yeah, that was a brooch. That's where I got the design for that. And I do other things. I've been, and give these away as thank you gifts, or Dame Alice Megan Catwin used to sell these through her Gold Key booth at Eggles and other events she went to raise money for the barony. Or I think that one we may have turned into a box of darts as a prize at Eggles tourney, things like that. But they're fun to do. They really are. Oh, this one I love. This was a thrift store find. It was wooden. It's lined. It's a ice bucket.
Oh,
So I sanded the finish off, and that's a 12th century design that I painted on it. And these are the big square ones are Italian Renaissance. And they were all Eggles prizes. Oh, this was from 3 times in the 1980s. I worked with WISTEC, which was like OMSI in Portland, the science factory now. It's sort of a kids science museum thing. And they did, they hosted a touring display of the Magna Carta. And they contacted the SCA and said, would you like to do a Life in the Time of King John exhibit? So we did. And this was just one of the coolest things we ever did. Mistress Janet of Arden had a section of the Bayeux Tapestry, and she had a thing where you could actually practice sewing the couching stitch. And we had card weaving loom you can see in the background there. We had weapons in a case. We had heraldic stuff. You know, we just had this whole huge room full of basically 12th to 13th century things. Then a couple of years later, the Passion Play from Lincoln Cathedral came touring through, and we did a public service announcement to advertise it. That's Ambrose and Corey, who did, they were riding toward Runnymede, and then we had the, King John being forced to sign the Magna Carta, and then they all trooped into WISTEC.
Is this Ambrose?
Yep.
No way.
no, I don't think I've ever seen him without white hair.
Well, yeah, this was in what, 1986, something like that.
Wow.
Wow.
Many, many moons ago. Yeah, 86. Yeah, that was Ulfheathen, our previous baron. Ivar is now a baron and a laurel down in the west. Who else? Most of these people don't play anymore. But we got somebody short to do King John, because apparently he was short. And the light was so terrific. Because we got this lightsaber shot that was just fabulous.
That's amazing, considering it's 80s technology, right?
Yeah. And I did all the costuming for this.
Holy cow.
Oh, and this is part of my Anglo-Saxon obsession. This is a leather lined with linen ring bag that I made this winter. Had a good time with that. Doing this really nice little raised plate stitch on the hanger. That's done with linen thread. And then I got into recreating, there's a wonderful thesis that's now a book by a woman named Christel Brandenburg from the Netherlands. And she wrote about fabric in Friesland in the 7th to 9th centuries. And in it, she shows pictures of the various hats that were found from this period. So I made all the hats to the sizes that were given, and they fit me. I mean, I'm only 5'3". So there's this, which looks like the kind of the prototype of the little Dutch girl hat. And there's the pillbox hat that you saw before. And then some other, this ear flap hat is basically a pillbox with a long piece sewed over it to make ear flaps.
And they are so adorable on you.
They are.
And this is, again, it's basically a pillbox, but it goes way long on the back to keep the back of your neck warm. And they're just so practical, and they were fun to make.
Oh, that's my favorite picture, that one. I love that one.
Could you believe this? It looks like a little baker boy hat. I mean, that's a, this is a cap that was found in Raskert in the northern Netherlands, and it had a bill on it. People have said, well, how do you know they didn't wear it backwards? And I said, well, because you saw the pink one. If you want to cover your neck, that's what you do. If you want to shade your eyes, this is what you do. Just think about it. Because what I find is when you actually make something to the size and materials that they originally were, you get a feel for what people are literally working with, what it feels like, what the concept is. And if you've looked at the other things that they do in their culture, you have a sense for what the sewing repertoire is. And so, for example, when I made I made a Skuldaham hood, which is 11th century Norway, way up north, might be Viking, might be Sami. There's a close-up of this is a Skuldaham belt, which I made and have taught a class about.
I want to take that class because I want to learn how to do that braiding.
Oh, I just went on the internet and figured it out. I can send you a diagram. This is the hood, and I made it to the dimensions that they found on the body. Well, the body was probably between 5 feet and 5'3", and I'm 5'3", so made to the proper dimensions, it fits me perfectly. And the ties in the back mean that you don't turn your head inside the hood. You get to turn the hood with your head. So it's practical. You could do archery in that hood. You could work in it, you could hunt in it, you could fish in it. And if you felt the wool enough, it's waterproof. But a lot of people size this up to make them bigger, and you end up with this giant kind of cumbersome thing. But if you look at the rest of the garments, they had the concept of gores. And if you actually put gores on the shoulders, which I didn't hear because I didn't need to, you can make it fit a larger person. So you don't have to just mechanically make it bigger, because then it gets too big for your head and it won't fit closely and be practical and warm. So, that's what I mean by you have to think like the person that made it. And what was it used for? And why would you have done this?
And make them action clothes.
Yes, because people lived in these things.
These are not costumes, it's clothing.
Right. And the big mystery with this one, and everybody goes, oh, I don't know, because the very top where it's gold with red is not cut. And it's like, why did they have an open back and then cut open the fold when you could just put the fold in the back and have the opening in the front? But it's cut on a slant. The back is longer than the front. And it occurred to me when I was cutting it out that if you cut out two, one would open the sensible way with the fold in the back and the opening in the front, and the other one, given the assumption that you want the back to be longer, your face is in the fold, so you slit that, but you might leave it together there just because, why have to sew a seam if you didn't have to? It's like, I don't think there's any esoteric meaning here. I think it's just practicality. Fabric is expensive. You got to make it yourself. You're going to use every scrap of it in the most economical way. So, that's my current thing to play around with, is just can I recreate the thing to better learn how people thought about it? And I love trying to get inside somebody's head that way.
Same. I love that.
And one of the things that I've learned in the last few years with the research I've done is that in the Viking world, especially, there probably wasn't a lot of embroidery The embroidery that's found is usually seam treatments and edge treatments. And they're both practical and decorative at the same time. You get some decoration, but you also bind this without having to do a hem in it. You can couch down a yellow thread with your red thread and you get some, you can strengthen your seam that way. When you begin to see embroidery is when you get Christian liturgical vestments coming north, either from looting or because they're converting to Christianity. This is a Merovingian belt that I made to go with my Merovingian outfit. And this would be about, about 580, 590. And this is only version 1. The leather should be double with a string between them so that you get a raised welt. But they did this sewing in the leather as a decorative effect. And it shows up in the tomb of Arnegund in Paris from that time period.
Did the same sort of stitching in the leather to make it stiffer. That was part of the reason.
Yes. And if it were thin leather but doubled with the cording sewn into it, then you would get a stiffer belt. So
fascinating.
So that's the belt on this is a Merovingian outfit of about the late 6th century.
I love the drape of that veil. Is that like a silk linen blend?
No, it's silk. It's a repurposed sari.
Oh.
And I cut it so there was just a little bit of the gold trim because the motif was the same, was period appropriate motif actually in the sari fabric.
Wow. It just looks so good. And I love the garters that you're wearing.
Aren't those terrific? I mean, they had these above the knee stockings and then they were cross gartered with, there should be buckles on the foot and then buckles up here. And then the little strap that hangs down is just a separate decorative strap with a little strap hanger thingy on the end. I mean, the Merovingians were all about bling.
Yep. And I think that's us full circle. Yeah. Okay, so I'll stop sharing. So, wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and some of this is going to culminate. Some friends and I are trying to work on doing a very authentic early Anglo-Saxon installation for Eagles turning.
Oh, fun.
When we can have one again, probably 2022. But that's the target date anyway.
It's amazing. Wow. So we didn't really talk about your pelican ceremony and how you found out, and is there a story there?
Oh, there's a story there. I'm not sure what went on, of course, in the Pelican Council, but we were at an event. I don't think it was Eagles. I think it was a small local audientum event up at a park where we used to have Eagles. And she called me up and said, I am minded to make you a pelican. And she just called for it. I mean, it was small. So she just called all the peers who were there, knights, pelicans, laurels, to come up and made me a pelican, gave me the little circlet that she had, which was one made by Master Baron Sir Gerhard Kendall, which was really strong juju. And poof, I was a pelican. 1989. So that was the first time I'd gotten a Kingdom Award in person. All my other, my AOA and my Goot and my Jam had all been in absentia because, of course, nobody ever came south. So it was, that was actually very special to me because I liked the fact that all 3 peerages were there.
Yeah. I think that there's something very validating about being seen by all 3 peerages. It's one of the things I like about people having, well, and I should say all 4 peerages now,
Yeah.
of people having someone from each peerage speak for them during their ceremony. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So 89 1999 was your Pelican, and then your Laurel was pretty recent.
2013, I think. Looking here at my various things. Yeah, 2013 at the West Ontario War.
How has that, so Raven is asking, she's curious about becoming a Laurel a while after becoming a Pelican. Is there an identity shift or just an extension of what you were already doing?
For me, it was an extension of what I'm already doing. I felt that I was a Pelican. I mean, I never really thought about peerages. I just did what I did. And it was like, oh, poof, you're a Pelican. Oh, okay. That was back in the days before people had vigils or anything like that. I feel like I became a Laurel. I'm not what I thought of as an artistic person, but I started exploring that through the SCA and, you know, sort of worked my way into it, learning various things as I went. I had a little bit of that imposter feeling because it wasn't entirely clear to me why I was being laureled, unless it was just because I made all that stained glass. But that's how Pelicans do art. You just do it all. But I like promoting the arts. I mean, again, going back to the research geek side of me is I just love research. I love learning things. And I love sharing that with other people, whether it's through publishing the Elphill Times or whether it's, you know, making stuff to give away or display to make events look better. That's kind of what I'm all about. So that's how I think of myself as a Laurel, is somebody who finds things and gives them away. Spiffs them up along the way.
I like to call it facilitating.
Yeah. No, it really is. And that gives me a great deal of joy. It really does. And
we were talking earlier, and you mentioned that I'm not going to phrase it correctly, but you talked about becoming a peer was a lot like becoming an adult.
Oh, yeah. I think I know for a lot of us, the SCA is a chance to play. It's a chance to have that childlike wonder and explore things and all the wonderful stuff about trying things you don't have to be really good at, because it's just fun to try things and be able to do them sort of because it's your hobby. And, you know, you move on to another thing and you learn how to do that sort of, and that's okay. And then some of us find things that they really, you know, you really want to become really good at, and we do that. But I think of peers as being people who have that, but then are also, in a sense, adults who, you know, I think that's, for me, that's what the PLQs are all about. The peer-like qualities is it's being the honor, the courtesy, the service, the being able to be self-aware, to distance yourself from an argument or a situation, to see the thing in a broader context, to be able to give advice and say, well, have you looked at it this way or that way, to help people compromise and negotiate, and, you know, all of those things that, you know, you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I adulted today. And I thought, no, one aspires, I hope, to become an adult so that you don't feel like you have to put that on. You just are, you know, and there's nothing wrong with being an adult. Being an adult doesn't mean you lose, you don't have to lose that childlike quality and the joy of things. But I think that being a peer means you can also do those things that we really think of as adult, you know, that are grown up, that are mature and responsible. And we can take responsibility not just for ourselves, which everyone should do, but for events, for other people in a leadership role. because that's what leading is taking responsibility and hopefully sharing it with others.
I love that. Do you have students, peerage students? Because I mean, you've been a teacher all your life, and it sounds like you teach everyone that you come in contact with. But do you have?
Which is why I don't have peerage students. I have people that I advocate for in peerage councils, and I have told them I am doing that. But I have not taken any formal students or proteges or apprentices or anything like that. I'm perfectly happy to help lots of people, and I help the people I really like even more. But I think it's because I spent 30 years teaching that I'm not really sure I want to formalize that. I had a career where I worked in my September to June work year, the equivalent of a 50-week, 40-hour-a-week year crammed into 9 months. And then you got them all back in the summer because you sure needed them by then. I worked evenings, I worked weekends because I was teaching writing. And now I don't have to do that. I can play. So I'm playing. And for me, that means researching and sharing and teaching. I mean, I teach classes and stuff. And I'm very happy to do that and to help people. But I really don't want it to be formal. And right now in my life, I mean, I spent 14 months, 24/7, taking care of my sister while she underwent cancer treatments. She beat the cancer at a price, but you know, I mean, things like that happen in life, and that came first. And I needed to be able to just go away and do that. And I know that things like that will happen. I'm of an age where friends and family, you know, will need my help. So I'm very strong about not undertaking things I can't do 100%. So I would rather help whenever I can, rather than set up a framework that I might not be able to stick to. So it probably amounts to the same thing, but I feel better about it.
I was gonna say, I think you do so much that that's probably just something in your head that should
Yeah.
be free.
Yeah, I think so. But you know, head games matter too.
Yeah, they do a lot.
They keep us sane.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
but
go ahead.
no, ask your question.
Oh, well, I was just, we're at about an hour and a half. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Goodness, what did I put on all my notes? I don't know. I've written about 5 articles for TI, but that's more of the other people want to hear about this kind of thing. I actually, I made a, I created an index for the book Fabulous Feasts because it didn't have one, and turned it loose so that booksellers could sell it along with the book. I don't know. I just do stuff. I used to tell my students that my AP class, and I think this is true of me too, it was like a shark. It just keeps moving forward, you know, and that's what I do. I just do the next thing. And that gives me great joy. You know, there's so many things that I could be about 5 people and still not get them all done.
For sure. So I did want to ask you about the Lion's Strength. That is an award that was new to me. And my impression of it is that it's sort of like a Lion of Ontir, but because a lion can only be given once a reign, it's like a backup for,
well,
I don't know.
When I was given it, I had never heard of it either. And they said, well, this is for people who have been in the SCA for 30 years or more.
Hmm.
So I certainly qualified for that. I've been a member all that time and doing one thing or another.
Wow.
So
So like sustained service to
yeah,
the society.
yeah, because I remember having a conversation with somebody in the barony a few years back, and they looked at me and they said, well, what do we get you when you have all the awards? And I said, why don't you just say thank you in court? That would be just fine. You know, but that, I think that is a problem for some people. I mean, I think of it as hoop jumping. I'm not interested in jumping through other people's hoops. I've got, you know, a couple of college degrees, and I've had certifications for this and that. And I've got a bunch of awards in the SCA, and I've never sought any of them. I just, you know, I just do the next thing. I do what I enjoy doing because this is my hobby. And I did what I had to do for my job. And, you know, if I got recognition for that, well and good. But I'm not a very competitive person. So awards are nice. I'd rather just be thanked in a way. You know, I was very sincere about that. If somebody just says heartfelt thank you, that means a lot to me. And if I did something public, then publicly, that means a lot. But the problem in the SCA is that for people, and I, you know, this is not disparaging, but some people want awards and it means more to them. And you run out of things to give people. You know, what do you do after you have a peerage? Well, you get another peerage. You just keep on keeping on. You know, how do you acknowledge that in a meaningful way? And as we have, you know, we have an aging population in the SCA. And you know, that's something to bear in mind. And I think that's, my guess is that's where the Alliance strength comes in, is to recognize longevity and, you know, stick to itiveness and, you know, still being there for people.
Thanks for not taking your peerage and running.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, I see people who do that. They become a peer, or they reign or serve as landed nobility, and then they kind of disappear, or they vie to be a baron and baroness and they don't get it, so they kind of go away, as though if they didn't get that, there was no point. And you know, that's not me. I'll just do what I do. So
I think it's one of the kind of danger traps about peerages is that people make that such a goal that when they get it and it's not what they think it is, it's not the end of a journey, it's not a destination, it's a recognition along the way of a path that you're going to continue for the rest of your life. Yeah. And I think that people who view it as a destination, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with goal setting, there's nothing wrong with wanting a peerage, but if that becomes everything that the SCA is about for you, you're going to be really, really disappointed when you get there, because it's not a destination. It's the next step. Yeah. I mean, and people say you don't, you know, you recognize someone as a peer, that they're already doing the Pelican thing or the Knight thing or the Laurel thing or the Master of Defense thing. So that, yeah, it's just a sort of opening up, saying, okay, see this person, this is the quality that they are. But they keep going. And, you know, it really is a case where I think the journey is its own reward, very much so. Absolutely.
You know, you can always teach a new course and get to geek out with more people and make more cool things and give them away and share them. And, you know, it's endless.
Yeah, for sure. My to-do list never shrinks.
Oh no.
Just keeps getting longer and longer.
No, this year I discovered leather and I thought, oh, you can make all these things out of leather. So that's something I'm kind of looking forward to exploring, because making that belt or the ring bag, that was really fun. I thought,
So do you have a trick for sewing leather? Because I hate it because it's so hard to get the needle. Like,
oh, well, a friend loaned me multi-pronged diamond punch.
Oh.
So when I made the belt, I drew the line and went boink, 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 you know, with a little mallet in the punch so that you've actually pierced the leather. So then you can go through very easily.
Okay.
So that worked for the kind of stuff I was doing. And I think that's probably the way to go for a lot of it. You know, the ring bag was easy because it was kind of a suede-y, supple, thin leather, and you could sew it like a heavy cloth. But the belt was a little thicker, and man, my fingers were so sore.
Yeah.
If I
It's
had
been my experience.
yeah, you know, and if I hadn't had the punch, it wouldn't have been possible. But so, and you know, I need to find somebody who can show me some tricks and stuff because I've done, you know, these are very rudimentary things, and I don't really know that much about it yet. So, but
So
more to learn.
would you say that's your next big project is doing more leather work?
Yes, they've Marquita Volken over in Switzerland had reevaluated some of the Sutton Hoo find, and she decided that this massive stuff that they found was probably shoes and a pouch. And when she teased it apart, it was a pouch about, this size, maybe 6 by 8, with a back and a front and a divider. A pouch with an overflap and a thong through and a buckle, not a thong, but a strap. And what was probably in it was a little paring knife size eating knife plus a pick. I did not know that Anglo-Saxons apparently used what I think must look like a sharpened popsicle stick to pick up things to eat. And that seems to be what was in this pouch. And it would be on your belt and you would carry that. And I thought, oh, okay, I could try making one of those. So that's the next thing I have my eye on.
Eating utensils. And was it metal or was it wood?
Well, the pouch is leather, and
Right.
then it would be a wood or bone handled metal knife, and then a wooden pick that you could use for picking things up.
Wow. That's really cool.
A spear.
Yeah, basically your table spear.
Now I'm picturing Summit's food fights with little spears.
Yes.
Little spear throwing
And
contests.
marshmallow catapults.
That has one of those, I think.
So I think Raven wants you to tell the story of the Valley River Revel.
Oh my God, the revel, yes. We did a lot of dance here and back in the 80s. And because we had this woman who'd been with the DuPont Circle Dance Group in DC and had been a semi-professional Renaissance dancer. So she taught us all how to dance. So we had a group of about 8 people. And we had some people who were very good at fencing because there was a lot of crossover at that time between a fencing group in Eugene and the SCA. And I don't know how we made the connection with Valley River Inn, but they were having a convention of auto parts clerks. And they were into doing themed conventions. So these guys were getting liquored up in their hospitality suite, and they were all there because it was all guys and then their wives or girlfriends or whatever. And they set up these U-shaped tables and they wanted us to come and dance and fence to entertain them during dinner. And they weren't going to give them any utensils. They were going to eat with their hands, you know, the typical ignorant idea of medieval food. And one of the gals that was organizing it had a place out of town. So she brought in a couple of straw bales and a goat that was tethered there eating the straw quite happily. And then she had a big shaggy dog. I don't know what it was. I think it was a mutt, but it was the same size as the goat. It kept trying to hump the goat. It was insane. And these guys were all liquored up and they were drinking more with dinner and we were dancing and they were making rude comments. So the man and the woman who were fencing decided that they would they would put the fear of God in them. So they moved up and they were fencing right up next to the table and swishing their real épées right over their heads and stuff. And these guys kind of like, oh, okay, we'll back off and be good. So the deal is that we got, I don't know, maybe $100 or something for doing this. And we were told that they would feed us. Well, these guys trooped off to do whatever they were going to do after dinner, which was probably drink some more. And we're there. There were just a couple of the waiters left. And we said, okay, we get to eat now. And they said, what? And we said, but you said that if we entertained, we'd be fed. Nobody told us that. I thought, oh, this is not good. So they were sort of clearing things away. So we were all in garb, of course. So we just kind of went around and, you know, this loaf of bread went under somebody's arm under the cloak, and, you know, the brick of Tillamook cheese went under the other arm, and Ambrose grabbed a carafe of wine and put it. We had, you know, I remember picking up great gobs of grapes and stuff. So we made dinner out of it. We just sort of exited and went back to the house of one of the women and spread it all out in the living room and had ourselves a feast. And Ambrose delivered the carafes back the next day after we finished the wine. So we got our food.
Nice.
But yeah, that was epic.
Raven says Cornelius put a pineapple down his poofy Norse pants.
Yes, he did. I don't know how he managed that, but yes. You know, we're all walking around like this because we've got food like trapped between our upper arms and our torsos.
So it amazes me that Adiantum has such a long-term relationship with the Valley River Inn.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, well, it was a locally owned hotel. The Woodward family owned it. And in between, I had worked, when I wasn't playing SCA, just right after I retired, I was also president of the Willamette Valley Hardy Plant Group, which was a large local garden club. And we would every 4 years put on a conference. It would rotate from Eugene to Portland to Seattle to Victoria and back. So I worked with the Valley River Inn on that as well. So I autocrat mundanely as well as in the SCA. So I've worked with them for, well, 25 years, I guess. But they're just they're a big hotel, but small enough that they have the freedom to do what they want, unlike the chain hotels, which are bound by corporate regulations and stuff. So for us, it's this really nice, you know, in between size that's big enough to hold the event, not enough hotel rooms for everybody's taste, but you know, they let us do stuff like stick things to the windows.
It's really epic. Yeah. Well, Rifkin, do you have any other questions?
I don't think.
Well, thank you so much for tonight. This has been such a treat. You are just amazing. Sometimes we have these interviews and we're just kind of like sitting here with our mouths open at how much you've done.
And tonight was definitely one of those nights. And I also have a very long to-do list. And talking to you tonight has like put a few more projects on it, I think. So thanks for that.
Well, good. Then my mission here is get people energized.
Awesome. Yeah, we need it right now because
we really do.
We're not meeting in person, and having things to keep us interested in the SCA is super important. So, but
you know, I mean, I do want to say that I think your interviews have really been important because I've seen a couple, you know, I've seen a number of them, but a couple of them involved our Prince of the Summits. And it occurred to me that I would not normally, in a sense, have that much face time with him to know about him and his origin story and how he came to be who he is and what he thought about things and stuff. And I got more of that from interviews than I would normally get, because he'd be busy being Prince and having to do all the things that he had to do. And I think that these have been wonderful that way, you know, and have really, I mean, if people go back, especially since you're archiving them, go back and watch some of them, you can catch up on the history part, but you also get a sense for who people are as people. And I believe so fervently that that's really important. I mean, in the SCA, we're here for the people as much as the history. And this is, I think, a wonderful way to allow people to get to know folks, and then maybe feel like when they see them at an event, you can go up and say, oh, I saw your interview. What about blah, 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 you know, and you can start a conversation more easily. And that's terrific. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for saying that. That was absolutely one of our original goals, was to kind of close that gap a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting it right on the head.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. So I'm going to talk about the things that we have coming up this week. On Sunday, Rifkin is teaching a hoodie class. She's wearing one.
It's not period, it's SCA cool based on a period find. So we will not be doing a period hoodie, but we're going to be doing something cool.
And then Tuesday on Branch of Laurels, I'm interviewing Mingo from Aitenfeld, who is, I can't remember all the things, but there's a flyer on the sisters interview page and you can look it up. And then next Wednesday, we have Bridget Ross, who is a Pelican and a Lion of Ontario. So that'll be super fun. She's not living here anymore, but she still agreed to come and hang out with us.
She's a dynamo, and it'll be fun to talk to her. So, thank you so much. I have to tell you, this has been really soul refreshing for me, talking to you tonight. And I just really appreciate that about you. So
thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope that you guys had as much fun as we did, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Good night.
Night.